So welcome everyone to, thanks so much for being here with us. My name is Ariel Cates. I'm the Director of Programming at Village Preservation. So just a little bit about Village Preservation. We have been documenting, celebrating, and fighting for the preservation of Greenwich Village, the East Village, and NoHo since 1980. We work to expand and extend landmark and zoning protections and stop inappropriate development while also encouraging appropriate development in our neighborhoods. We conduct roughly 75 programs a year, all of which are now virtual and most of which are free and open to the public. Our events are meant to illuminate the cultural and architectural heritage, history, and depth, and the value of preservation in our communities. We're a nonprofit membership-based organization, so your involvement and support mean the world to us. You can learn more at our new website, villagepreservation.org, and please do consider becoming a member or making a donation if you're able at villagepreservation.org/donate. So just a little bit of protocol for the evening. I'm gonna go dark while our speakers are talking, but I will be here. If you have any questions or thoughts, please feel free to chat me. That's what I'll be doing during the talk. And if you have questions for any of our speakers, please use the Q&A function for that, and we'll get to your questions at the end of the talk. So I am very pleased to introduce our speakers this evening. Sekou Odinga, who will join us momentarily, was a member of Malcolm X's Organization of Afro-American Unity and a founding member of the New York chapter of the Black Panther Party, as well as the Black Panther International Section, and was a member of the NY Panther 21. Déqui Kioni-Sadiki is a Black feminist, educator for liberation, artist, poet, and activist working on behalf of and with US-held political prisoners and prisoners of war, who led the Sekou Odinga Defense Committee campaign to win the November 2014 release of her husband, former POW and Black Panther Party Black Liberation Army member. She is a chair of the Malcolm X Commemoration Committee, has organized with the Northeast Political Prisoner Coalition, the New York City chapter of the National Jericho Movement for Amnesty and Recognition of US-held PPOWs, a former member of the National Council of Formerly Incarcerated Girls and Women, co-host and producer of Where We Live, a weekly public affairs show, co-editor and contributing essayist of Look for Me in the Whirlwind, from the Panther 21 to 21st Century Revolutions, with essays, interviews, and articles published in the Amsterdam newspaper, San Francisco Bay View, the Huffington Post, the Journal, and the Journal of Research Group on Socialism and Democracy. Matt Meyer is the Secretary General of the International Peace Research Association, the Chair of the International Fellowship of Reconciliation Financial Advisory Committee, and the War Resistors International Africa Support Network Coordinator. A noted educator, author, and organizer, Matt focuses on an extensive range of human rights issues. So I will turn it over to you now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ariel. So I think as Ariel has introduced those of us who will be speaking, it's important to start with a grounding in the place and the date. So even though I am, in fact, a born and raised New Yorker, so speaking on behalf of a West Village of a New York-based historical preservation society means a lot to me. Right at this moment, I'm coming to you from Aquinnah, Massachusetts, on Wampanoag land, with greetings and love to the Wampanoag Aquinnah Chief, Ryan Melanson, and to all of our friends and family and relations. We're also coming today, of course, on the 75th anniversary of the dropping of atomic bomb on largely unarmed civilian population of Hiroshima, Japan. And there's no way of thinking about the US as empire and the US as super military empire without thinking of that bomb dropping 75 years ago today. I then have to say, as I see Baba Sekou join us, and with déqui here, what I said whenever the three of us appear in various forums across the country. And that is that it continues to be, it has always been a tremendous honor to share the stage, to share the space with these two people. Before Sekou's release a few years ago, after decades and decades and decades behind bars, I used to say that it was an honor to share the stage with déqui because she was one of the best organizers I had ever met, the leading organizer of Black liberation movement politics in New York City and throughout the Northeast. And that truth only got confirmed when she led a campaign that most people said couldn't happen, wasn't possible, that her husband, that her beloved, that our beloved Baba Sekou Odinga would walk free amongst us today. And so it continues to be an honor, Sister déqui, to be with a great organizer such as yourself. It goes without saying that there's a special presence that Sekou has for us, whether we're in person or just across these virtual screens. We hear a lot of talk about Minister Malcolm X, Al-Hajj Malik El-Shabazz, but we rarely get a chance to be with and to talk with and to share with someone who was directly part of his organizations and his movements, that was directly touched by Malcolm himself. We hear a lot, we see t-shirts that say, Assata taught me, but we very rarely ask or look to think about who taught Assata. And Baba Sekou is one of those directly involved in Assata's upbringing as a young Panther and Assata's liberation as an incarcerated felon. So for so many reasons, those and many more, it's just an incredible privilege of my life to be able to be with Baba Sekou and to somehow be the person who gets to speak first and say these brief words of introduction and solidarity. I guess the other thing when I think about place and date and time is that, you know, we intentionally titled the book, which came out a couple of years ago, based on the same title that the Panther 21 members of the New York Black Panther Party rounded up and indicted and put to trial in what was then the longest trial and most expensive trial in New York State history on ridiculous and crazy trumped up charges, and Sekou was one of those 21. They were able to put out a book which they titled based on the famous Marcus Garvey quote, "Look for me in the whirlwind." And what we did a few years ago with the help of PM Press is we took that entire book cover to cover and reprinted it. But we didn't just reprint it. We reprinted it in a form where before and after, sort of bookending the old book itself, the historical work, were new essays that déqui and myself wrote by way of historical introduction and contextualization, and that surviving Panthers like Sekou, Durub bin Wahad, Jamal Joseph, and others wrote to talk about from then to now. And we therefore subtitled the book, Look for Me in the Whirlwind, from the Panther 21 to 21st Century Revolutions. So given that hubris, that vision that we had some years ago, it's extremely interesting to come at this topic today, August of 2020, looking at the last months of the history of our times. I want to say something about Malcolm and Martin, because a number of us have always said that we're not going to fight our grandparents' battles, and that we're not going to go with the false dichotomies of Martin versus Malcolm, that the more those two men lived and expanded their views, the closer together they came. And so it was interesting to note that when a Congressman John Lewis, and we're from the faction that's not very big on what happens in Congress, but when he passed just recently, Reverend James Lawson, who Dr. King called the most strategic thinker of his time, Reverend Lawson eulogized John Lewis by saying that we will not remain quiet, that we cannot stand still, that we must continue the fight until this economy that is based on plantation capitalism is fully eradicated, is fully turned around to be an economy for equality and justice for all. And if one from that part of the movement can talk about plantation capitalism at this date and time, it says something about what and where America is. Because many of us think of the US not simply as a nation state, but as an empire and as the prison house of nations, not just the direct colony of Puerto Rico or the colonized territory of northern Mexico, but colonized people, including Black people, including New African people, including land that is not free within our very shores. And so we looked at this book and this history as a way of looking back to look forward, the Sankofa vision of understanding history as a parable to the present. And that's why the first pages of our book shine with a quote I'm going to read, and I'm going to have to take myself a video for a second to read it. But it's a quote from the great Pan-African historian, another direct friend of Malcolm, John Heinrich Clarke. And John Heinrich Clarke wrote this, which is in the foreword, the dedication of the book. Clarke wrote, "History is not everything, but it is a starting point. It is a clock that people use to tell their political and cultural time of day. History is a compass they use to find themselves on the map of human geography. It tells them where they are, but more importantly, it tells us what we must be." So we opened with that quote because it was our great desire to put this history of the Panther 21, as much has been written about the Panthers, not so much on the New York Panthers, not so much on East Coast Panthers, not so much on the pivotal campaign and work and ultimate finding not guilty of all members of the Panther 21, that trial. But we wrote this book to look at current realities. We dedicated this book to a still incarcerated member of the Panther 21. And I'm sorry, I don't have the visuals here. I don't know if Sekou or déqui could later hold up not just the book, but we dedicated this book to Sundiata Acoli. And Sundiata is a member of the Panther 21 who is still incarcerated in his 80s, actually just recovering from COVID-19, and yet still incarcerated in his 80s because of his work for the freedom of his people. And déqui is holding up a postcard which I believe has several different photos of Comrade Sundiata Acoli, and his name needs to be a household word. His name needs to be on everyone's lips, not necessarily those who are elected officials and given already more fame than perhaps one person could hold. So we look at the still incarcerated Panthers. We look at these questions coming up around this pandemic about mutual aid and people-to-people solidarity. And we look at the history of the Panthers and the New York Panthers, and we can do nothing but conclude that we have a world of things still to learn. They say that in the last 2 months, the Black liberation uprisings in the US have featured maybe upwards of 26 million people on the streets. We're looking at a time of deep economic and imperial decline. And we're looking at a time where members of radical, progressive left movements are looking and searching for unity. And the Panthers found that unity. It may have been short-lived. It was certainly viciously attacked by the US government, illegal by their own means. But in fact, putting together this book, or helping put together this book, was an act of extraordinary love and excitement, because it was about tracing some of those histories about how they connected people to people, city to city, community to community, both within the Black liberation movement and within the Black New African community, but also with allies in Puerto Rico, through the Chicano realities, and also with white solidarity workers. So this book was a labor of love. And I guess the last thing I want to say before handing it off to Baba Sekou is just to read a little short excerpt about the book. I feel like I'm not quite saying enough about New York City for a Greenwich Village historical presentation. And often when we're in person, we have little debates about Brooklyn and Queens and Manhattan and where the Panthers were strongest and where Malcolm spoke the most. And we'll see if Baba Sekou wants to take it in this direction. But right now, I'm going to conclude my remarks with a very brief excerpt from the book itself. The stories and voices of the Panther 21 resonate today because they boldly confronted their own tumultuous times with creativity, candor, and directness. This anthology brings together the classic texts from their collective autobiography with contemporary commentary from the surviving Panthers on lessons learned and directions for our times. Sister déqui added a piece on the attempts to set the stage for the ideas that follow. And in addition to the key new pieces by Sekou, by Deruba, by Jamal, each of whom did time behind bars even after the acquittal of the 21, we also have rarely seen and never before published materials from Panther 21 members Afeni Shakur, Ali Bey Hassan, and Kwesi Balagoon, as well as some key writings of Sundiata Akoli and others. There are special sections on photography. There's a chapter by New York Panther Dalal Sunni Ali on Lumumba Shakur, and there are some special comments from Shaba Om. But perhaps most excitedly, former Panthers or still incarcerated Panthers, Mumia Abu Jamal and Imam Jamil Alamin, are featured in this book as people who graced it with their forwards and afterwards, strengthening our efforts to build connections between the prison walls with the force of their own mighty words. We would do well to listen to them behind bars and to listen to the Panthers and post-Panthers amongst us today. It's a great pleasure in solidarity to step down and say greetings to Baba Sekou and Sister déqui. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah, well, thank you, Matt. Greetings, everyone. This is Sekou Odinga. I'm happy to be here this evening to be able to share with you a few words about the book, about what I think is going on or needs to be going on today. The book, I think, as Matt kind of pointed out, is a very fitting historical piece. It kind of, if you read it, you can kind of see that things have not changed very much today than it was in 1968, 69, 70. Around the time this book was written, actually, the original book was written, I believe, in 1970 and published in 71, if I remember correctly. And the things that were going on at that time, in terms of the the police brutality, the murders of people of color, the conditions of Black folks in terms of being on the bottom of the range, the poorest, the underemployed, more of them were underemployed, more of them were in jails, more. In short, everything was pretty much the same. As bad as it is today, it was then. And I think for me, the book kind of is a connection from the past to the present. It's like a bridge almost. Cause all the things, I mean, when you read, we talk, most of us, all of us that were in the book, besides Matt and déqui, my wife, all of them were members of the Black Panther Party. And if you were to look at the program and platform of the Black Panther Party, it would be today just as meaningful as it was then. That we want an end to police brutality. We want all Black people being held in these prisons and jails to be released. We want decent housing fit for the shelter of human beings. We want an education that teaches us our true history and our place in present day society. I mean, we can go on and on. If you read the 10-point program and platform of the Black Panther Party, you see that it's as meaningful today as it was yesterday. And as we see the mobilization of so many people today in the streets looking for the answers to all of these problems, I think we might do good to look back at some of the history and some of the programs and some of the platforms of people like Malcolm X, like Ram, like the Black Panther Party, like the Black Liberation Army, like the Republic of New Africa. I think if we look at some of those programs and platforms, we would see that they have some of the answers that we could use for today. Today, we still have so many of our members that were of the Black Panther Party, the Black Liberation Army, that are still in prison after 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, even 50 years. Brother Chip Fitzgerald has been in jail since 1969. Jalil Muttaqim has been in jail since 1971. Sundiata Acoli, who this book was dedicated to, has been in jail, been in prison since 1973. Most of our prisoners, those that I named, like Aranza Bauer, like Sundiata Acoli, like Jalil Muttaqim, like Russell Maroon Schultz, Mumia Abu Jamal. These brothers have been down for many, many years. All of them were members of the Black Panther Party. All of them struggled to make this a better world, not only for Black people, for all people. Programs that we were able to establish back in the 60s and 70s, today those programs have been adopted by others and carried on and are still helping people, like the Breakfast for Children. That program is still now universally held all through this here country as not only a good program, but a very necessary program, a program that many youngsters can't do without. Without it, they would miss one of the meals that they get every day, that they go to the free health clinics, the free pantries that we used to have what we call food giveaways, bags of food. Now they call them pantries. These programs we were doing way back in the 60s and 70s that were survival programs, programs to help us survive this racist country here that we call the U.S., this stolen country that we call the U.S. These were people who struggled because they knew that if they didn't struggle, certain things within the community, certain people would go without in the community. Children would go without food. Welfare recipients would go without what they were supposed to get without us advocating for them. People would be brutalized by the police if there was no consequence from as it is today for the police brutalizing and murdering people. People talk about the Black Panther Party, the Black Liberation Army being a violent organization. Their violence was in response to the unchecked violence of the state, to the unchecked violence of the police and the sheriff department and the white racist organizations like the Ku Klux Klan. The violence of the self-defense of the Black Panther Party, of the Black Liberation Army, came about as a response to that violence, to the violence of the state. And so when we look at it today and we talk about them being violent, what we should be talking about, them being heroes, them being people who showed the way, who put their own lives on the line to help and to protect others. And we should be today trying to help and protect them, especially those who are still locked up into these prisons and into these jails across the country. It is important that we recognize who they are and why they are there and support them. They deserve our support. They need our support. Without our support, some of them will never make it out. Some of them will die in prison, as others have already done. We've had members of our organization, the Black Liberation Army, the Black Panther Party, die in these prisons of different ailments, of old age, of different problems that could be easily dealt with if they were in the streets. So I think it's important that we recognize who they are and why they are where they are. And when we look at what's going on today in the streets, I think it's important that we realize that the people who are mobilizing and rising up and making demands for justice in the police department, for justice in the courts, for justice in the streets, they are just following the footsteps that we set early on. They are demanding the same things that we demanded, and some of those who made those demands, as I just said, are still locked up. And we should make it a point to bring them home, to make sure that another year, another month, another week don't go by with them behind bars without us raising our voices, without us raising our hands, without us raising some money to help them bring it home, so that we can bring them home to their families, to their children, to their grandchildren, to their great-grandchildren, which many of them are great-grandfathers today. When I was in prison, I had a number of grandchildren born while I was in prison, and a couple of great-grands, actually. And the one thing that helped me, or one of the things that helped me carry on, was the hope and the desire to see my grandchildren, to hug my grandchildren, to hold my grandchildren, my children, my family, those that I love, my wife, my mom, my father, all of who both passed while I was in prison. I never did get a chance to hug them or hold them. For 33 years I was in prison. I wasn't able to touch my my parents. You know, they had me in prisons where I couldn't have contact visits. Most of the time that I did in prison was in areas where I had no contact with visitors. You know, I spent 16 of the 33 years I spent in Marion, Illinois, which is a lockdown prison without any contact visits. And three more of those years I spent in Florence, Colorado, another lockdown prison that don't allow you to touch visitors. And some of our prisoners today are in situations like that. We need to lessen their suffering. We need to do something to bring them home. I'm going to end now with that, with a hope that folks will think about and remember who the people that we talk about in this book, Look for Me in the Whirlwind, were all members of the Black Panther Party, and some of our comrades are still locked down after so many years. So let's free them all. Let's bring them home. All power to the people. At this point, I guess I should introduce my lovely wife, déqui, kioni-sadiki, who will now speak to us.
Okay, thank you, babe. So before I start, I want to thank the participants who are here for being here. I want to thank Ariel and Lena and the Village Preservation Society for organizing this.
Yes.
It's very telling that this is being done in August, which is a commemoration of Black resistance, because there have been, throughout the history of the founding of this stolen land, August has been a time of Black resistance. And so there are key times that have happened. And so there have been people who say that we need to commemorate and honor the lives of people who resisted. So Black August is a very important time to people who are rebels, to people who resist, to people who struggle. So thank you for that. And I will also want to share with the book, because some people may or may not be so familiar with the book, right? So Matt is right when he says that this book was a labor of love. I believe that, as he mentioned Sankofa, it is so important. Sankofa is a Akan word that says to go back into the past in order to build for the future. My grandmother used to say, ain't nothing new under the sun, and it really is not. So when we talk about police terror, that's not new. When we talk about Black Lives Matter, a declaration that Black Lives Matter, that is not new. Nothing about what we're doing is new. The criminalization of Black resistance is not new. Like Black Lives Matter protesters and participants have been criminalized. Harriet Tubman was criminalized. The Black Panther Party was criminalized. So what I would like to do is to give you a taste of some of what was written in the book by some of my essay is called The Past Catches Up to the Present, right? And obviously that here we are in 2020, the only difference between what was happening then in terms of the police murder, unpunished police murder of Black and brown people, children, unarmed people, was that it wasn't televised. We have social media now. So everybody carries a camera because they have a phone. And so we're seeing it. But the numbers don't lie. I mean, this is something that has been going on. So in that vein, why the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense was co-founded speaks to that time, and why is it that the government waged such a vicious, brutal, terroristic war against unsuspecting Black Panther, the young people, because it was teenagers. People were the average 13, 14, 15, 17, 18 years old. It was young people. If you were in your late 20s, you were considered old when you were in the Black Panther Party. So, but these were young people who said, we have to fight. That, you know, there's no reason why a country that calls itself the richest country in the world, that children are going to bed and waking up and going to school hungry. There's no reason why capitalists should be robbing people. There's no reason why people shouldn't have access to health care. You have a toothache, you have no health care. A simple toothache can turn into an abscess and infection in your mouth, and then you can die. So the people who joined the Black Panther Party said that we need to defend our communities. We need to defend poor and working class people against this level of violence, right? Because the violence that we taught, that the Black Panther Party was protesting and resisting against, was the state violence of poverty, right? Of homelessness, of lack of health care, of lack of decent quality education, of mass imprisonment. I mean, if you talk about the Black Panther Party, like now, here we are in 2020, people are talking about mass incarceration, but in 1966, the 10-point platform and program was talking about the mass incarceration of Black people. So it's really a matter of the Black Panther Party understanding the material needs of the people, poor and working class Black people, and they had allies. So they inspired people all in this country, but all over the world. So there were white anti-imperialists who worked in solidarity as allies with the Black Panther Party, Chicano organizations, Asian organizations, you name it. There were people who said, we have freedom dreams and we want to serve our people, and so we're going to do that. And they inspired and motivated thousands, hundreds of thousands of people across this country. And the United States government, J. Edgar Hoover, said, no, 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 we cannot have that. So one of the things that I did in the essay that I wrote is raise some questions about why the FBI and J. Edgar Hoover called the Black Panther Party the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States. What were they doing that made them such a threat? And so I raised the question. So I just want to share some of what I wrote in my essay. The past catches up to the present. That Hoover directed the FBI to destroy this revolutionary, youth-led Black Panther Party poses a number of questions. What was it about the Black Panther Party which so challenged the capitalist power structure that it had to be neutralized? Could it be that as a revolutionary organization, the Black Panther Party stood firmly on the principle that Black people have the right to struggle for justice, self-determination, and liberation? That those Black Panther principles were firmly rooted in the Black radical tradition of self-defense and armed resistance to the white on Black violence and murder? Could it be that in a short span of time in cities, towns, and states across the country, thousands of urban, poor, and working class Black youth were becoming radicalized and joining the organization at a rate faster than anyone expected? Could it be that the Black Panther Party's 10-point platform and program provided poor and working class people with free breakfast for children programs, free health clinics, sickle cell anemia testing, food pantries, clothing drives, elder housing and domestic violence assistance programs, welfare rights advocacy, cultural programs, and more, all while the capitalist power structure did nothing to help people? Could it be that the Black Panther Party articulated that the violence of poverty, hunger, homelessness, lack of decent health care, housing, and education, police terror and murder, and all manner of oppression endured by poor and working class Black people were fundamentally a consequence and function of US capitalism, imperialism, colonialism, racism, and white supremacy? Moreover, could it be that the Black Panther Party was able to politicize, inspire, awaken, and transform urban Black youth's previously reactionary dysfunctional intercommunity violence and hostility into a revolutionary commitment and practice of serving and defending the material needs of other poor and working class Black people. What is clear is that the deepest politics and practices of the Black Panther Party then, like its true history and legacy now, remains a source of tremendous power and potential. What is clear is that the idea that Black people, especially youth, would engage in the struggle to defend their rights to justice, self-determination, and liberation with arms if necessary was so deeply troubling and threatening to the racist power structure that Hoover deemed them, as I said, the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States. So that's the part of the Black Panther Party that's never talked about. They are rather demonized as quote, cop killers and thugs and violent militants. But the services that they created are really what the legacy is. And so when the first book, the collective autobiography, was done, it was done to tell the narrative of the people that joined the Black Panther Party. And when we came together to do this, this is like, the book looks pretty thick, right? But it's 2 books in one. So it was to put that narrative out there, from the first person narrative from the people who were the defendants in the 21 case. But then now it was to say, what is the then and now? And the consequence of Cointelpro is that even though that 21 case, it took 2 years, and at the time it was the most expensive and longest case in the history of New York, they were ultimately acquitted, and they were facing hundreds of years in prison. Afeni Shakur, when she decided to defend herself, if any of them were convicted, they had like 300 and so cases against them to blow up the Bronx Botanical Gardens, department stores, police precincts, all kind of fabricated charges. But it was really to destroy the work and neutralize the work that was being done. And so they chose the leadership of the New York chapter of the Black Panther Party. And so the consequence of that is that they criminalized them. They were not able to put people in prison long-term, because people did stay in jail for two years, because as long as the trial went on, because everybody couldn't get bail, because bail was more like ransom. But that criminalization and that assault on the Black Panther Party did not stop. And as a result, as Sekou mentioned, we have members of the Black Panther Party who are still in prison today, simply for the act of resistance. And so my work and my involvement on behalf of those folks, those radicals and revolutionaries of the 1960s and 70s, they focus on them, our Black Panther Party members, our Puerto Rican, our indigenous freedom fighters, our white anti-imperialist freedom fighters, because they've paid the ultimate price. Them and their families have paid the ultimate price for participating in the level of movements that were taking place in the 1960s. And so when we want to inspire young people to get involved, we have to show them and teach them who came before them. Like, this is not new. People have done this, and there are ways to get involved, but we must fight for people who fought for us, so that can inspire people to say, well, I won't be left by myself. When stuff comes down, because people are being criminalized. We have earth activists who are in prison. We have technology activists who are in prison. We have Muslims who are in prison. We have so-called immigrants who are in prison. This is a prison nation. And so we say and we believe that if they come for me in the morning, they're coming for you at night, or if they come for you in the morning, they're coming for me at night. And this country has shown that. And so it's up to all of us to be involved, so that when they come for any of us, we have each other's back. So I love this book because I think that it's important to tell the history of then and now, and the people that make up this book are people that I love and admire and am inspired by. So you can get the book. It has pictures, it has essays, it has poetry. It has Assata Shakur, who everybody says, because Black Lives Matter chants her part of her poem. It's our duty to fight for our freedom. It's our duty to win. We must love and protect each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. But Assata was a part of a movement, and her co-defendant, Sundiata Acoli, has been in prison since May of 1973. And so we, you know, if we're gonna lift up Assata's name, we must lift up Sundiata's name. We must lift up Kioni-Sadiki's name, who is in prison simply because he refused to help the FBI capture her when her ransom, the warrant, the bounty on her head was $1 million, and they told him that they would give it to him if he helped them lure her so that they can capture her. But he's political, he's a revolutionary, he's also the father of her daughter, and he said, I cannot do that. I will not do that. And so they told him, if you don't help us, you'll spend the rest of your life in prison. And that's where he is today. So I'm hoping that people will have questions. I thank you for being here. I thank you for your listening ear. And hopefully we've inspired you to want to check out the book. So thank you so much. I don't know where, thank you. Oh, okay, there's Ariel.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Sphinx.
We are, well, this is a good first question. Valerie wants to know how folks can get involved in the work to free political prisoners.
Okay. Sekou, do you want to answer that question? There are a number of organizations. There is the JerichoMovement.com website. There's a New York City chapter of the Jericho Movement. You can go to the JerichoMovement.com website and find out who are our political prisoners. You can write to them. You can ask them if they have support committees. Take people to visit them so that they know about them. There's also the Northeast Political Prisoner Coalition, who has a website and a Facebook page. So if you Google Northeast Political Prisoner Coalition or the JerichoMovement.com, there are ways to do that. And everybody can, I always say this, everybody can't do the same thing, but everyone can do something. Some people can drive, so they can drive people, they have opened up New York State prisons, but they can drive people to go see. You can send people commissary money, because people in prison have to buy stuff, and they don't come from rich families. They come from poor and working class families, so they're supporting families on the outside. So there are ways, and if you're still not sure, you can get in touch with us, because we can tell you how to get involved.
If you're really confused and backlogged and you can't figure it out, we will directly tell you things you can do. So get in touch with Ariel, or if you know how to get in touch with us, get in touch with us, or get in touch with PM Preston. They'll put you in touch with us. But I want to just add to what Sister déqui said. You know, I opened up by saying that I'm coming at us today. You know, we're all on Native American land back in New York, Lenape, etc. But now directly for me on Wampanoag land. It's important also to say we just got a message a couple of days ago from Leonard Peltier, a prisoner from the American Indian movement, who talked about his health continuing to decline. And this is true for so many of our comrades inside who are, you know, hitting their 70s, 80s in the case of Sundiata, and decades in prison, especially under, but not just under, conditions of a COVID-19 pandemic. But I think it's important to say two other things in addition to talking about the individual names and calling them out, and the organizations, the JerichoMovement.com and Northeast Political Prisoner Coalition that déqui spoke about. One is that there is a coalition emerging between many of the different groups, individual committees, and whole organizations nationally and otherwise, called Spirit of Mandela. And this is a campaign, it's going to be international in scope, looking to bring US human rights abuses, in particular focused on political prisoners and imprisonment, but also the conditions that caused these things to take place. That's going to come together in October of 2021. So we've got that's actually a fairly short time for a major international tribunal, but it is a major effort that's being led by lawyers, academics, grassroots activists, and really it was an idea that came forth from our brother Jalil Muntaqim about putting together a tribunal like this. And it's also on the shoulders of acupuncturist, doctor of acupuncture, Matulu Shakur, also an incarcerated Panther and freedom fighter. But Matulu had some visions and ideas about how the US needs its own Truth and Reconciliation Commission in many ways. In fact, we're not ready for reconciliation because we haven't had even the limited revolution that South Africa or Zania had. But we need some truth, and we need some truth telling, and we need some space to talk about these issues of human rights abuses that are ongoing. So look for the Spirit of Mandela Coalition, and that's another way people can get involved. And then finally, I want to say, Sister déqui mentioned Cointelpro, and for those who are not already clearly aware, that's the counterintelligence program that was officially US government policy that also was clearly illegal policy. There were later on a Senate commission, a church commission that took apart the illegal Cointelpro activities of the Federal Bureau of Investigations. And so they said, of course, oh, Cointelpro is no more. And Cointelpro is the smoking gun that leads back to most of the currently incarcerated Panthers and prisoners. But the fact of the matter is, even though the FBI said that they had stopped Cointelpro, we know it continues. It's clear it continues in different names and in different forms. And so when you look at something like unidentified federal agents coming out in Portland and Chicago and other places, taking people off the street, in some ways looking very much like they're picking individual key activists off the street and taking them into unmarked cars and vehicles, we know that there's a continuation of all of the conditions that will create more and more political prisoners, already has created in the last months more and more political prisoners. So it's not just about it. It is in some ways very much about getting out all of these elders who are great symbols of resistance and carriers of our history. But it's not just about that. It's understanding that these guys were put into prison, the idea that the keys were going to be thrown away and they'd never see daylight again, with the idea that our movements could be successfully intimidated, could be successfully repressed. And of course, the great, sayings, you can jail the revolutionary, but you can't jail the revolution. You can kill the revolutionary, but you can't kill the revolution. And we see the resistance continues. And in some ways, in addition to getting these brothers out, it's also a question of making sure that the resistance continues and that every time there's a new version of Cointelpro in Portland, Oregon, or wherever, that we stand up, that we speak out, and that we say, just like the people of Portland did, say, that's not going to mean we're going to go home. In fact, if anything, we're going to come back tomorrow stronger. We're going to come back tomorrow in double the numbers. We're going to come back tomorrow and say, take us, because we may have to fill the jails before we turn this rotten system upside down.
You're on mute, Ariel.
Thank you. We have some questions from folks who are wondering how to get the book.
Okay, so we can put Sekou's chat in PayPal in there.
I've got it here.
Okay.
I'm gonna put it in the chat here.
And we will mail the book. We'll sign the book and send it to people. Right.
Great. Thanks for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have some New York chapter based questions.
Well, that's good, because so much of the history, when people talk about the Black Panther Party, they talk about the West Coast. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, so we know that, or at least I think that the New York City chapter was founded in the East Village. Yes.
Well, not that I won't say it was founded, but I think the first meetings that they had were in the East Village. Yes, that's correct. That there was that they did when the East Coast, when the West Coast, the Central Committee came to New York. They met at someone's apartment that was in the East Village. Yes, that's true.
And what political activism were folks involved in at the time that before they joined the before the Black Panther Party began? What's sort of the story of that?
There were different people were involved in different structures and different activities. Like Kwesi Balagoon, he was working in housing. They was trying to get decent housing for folks. I was working with youth out in Queens. I was a youth counselor in Queens. And different people were working in different other organizations. You know, some of them came out of How You Act, which was an anti-poverty program in Harlem. There was a number of different organizations. Like Robert Kaya was working down there in the village to organize in the village around housing and other problems that they were having. So it was a lot of different. It wasn't just one structure, one area. It was most of the areas where there was a need. There were people working in it that came out of them into the Black Panther Party.
And maybe I can pull in here for a second, not to answer, but to ask another question related to that. You know, in many ways, the growth of the Panthers, I think, historically, can be understood on the heels of the assassination of Minister Malcolm X. And, you know, Malcolm meant so much to New York. Obviously, he was an extraordinary national figure, but, you know, he was based in Harlem. And Sekou, you, I believe, met him first in Queens. And we introduced and said, you know, you remember the organization of Afro-American Unity, which predates your time in the Panthers. So maybe, Sekou, you can say a little bit about that period, the very end of Malcolm's life, the time you spent in organization of Afro-American Unity, and there just was an incredible celebration of an anniversary of the OAAU. So talk about maybe some of that, Malcolm in New York, and that leading to, you know, your involvement in the early New York Panthers.
Seems
well,
like...
Malcolm, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that Malcolm was very important to the history of struggle in the U.S. and especially in New York. And yes, I was blessed to be there while he was still alive, before he was assassinated. And I think that he was like a leader. I don't know. Everybody kind of know a little bit about who Malcolm X was, but we all kind of followed him. When I say we all, I'm saying most of the folks on the left, especially people of African descent on the left, followed Malcolm, followed his ideas and his thoughts about what was needed at that time. And so I don't know. I'm not sure if that answers what Matt wanted me to speak on. My involvement in the organization of Afro-American Unity was very, very short and not very intense. Like we mostly was just meeting and learning and getting a political education and getting the ideas that Malcolm was trying to impart on us of what needed to be done and how it needed to be done. So a lot of that was just basically political education for me.
And I think part of the importance and how Malcolm was able to, you know, why people gravitated towards him, because he was such a truth teller. And as when Matt opened up with reading Dr. Clark's thing about history being a time clock, Malcolm told us what time it was, and he said stuff that we said, damn, I've been thinking and feeling that, but didn't have the words for it. Or damn, I wish I had said that. So he spoke plainly and truthfully, and he spoke to the heart and spirit and the soul of people. And so you couldn't but be inspired and attached to him, because he just made it so plain.
Yeah.
I guess also, you know, to me, the organization of Afro-American Unity was so pivotal, and Sekou, please, you know, correct me and say more, but really historic, because it brought the question of Black human rights, Afro-American, African-American, Americans of African descent, or Africans enslaved here, to the fore on an international stage. It was an internationalization of the struggle. It wasn't the first, but it was key. And so to me, it's not a coincidence that you went from that experience, even if it was very short and formative for you, to becoming a founder of the Black Panther Party International. So I guess I'd love to hear some comments from you on that link, from this very international city to Malcolm's internationalism, to then going into exile in Algiers to found the Panther International Section.
Well, truthfully, yeah, true. Malcolm at the point when he went into Africa and traveled through Africa and the Mideast, he kind of reconnected people of African descent in this country with the continent, but more important, he kind of connected the continent with us. He kind of made them remember and realize and relate to what was going on here in the U.S., which they hadn't been doing so much until he went over there. He was over there. He actually went over there before the celebrated trip that he made after he left the Nation of Islam. He had went before then and had been inspired to go back and relate to and learn more and make more connections with Africa. For Malcolm, land was always important. The land itself. He talked about revolution being all about land. Without the land, there could be no real revolution, you know. And for me, when I went over to Africa to help build the international section of the Black Panther Party, and for the international section itself, I think I can speak for that. We were really inspired by the struggles of the African people that were going on over there. People like South Africa, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Guinea-Bissau, and other places like that. There was some real understanding about their struggle being the same as our struggle, and that some of the same folks that were oppressing them were in fact oppressing us. In fact to say the U.S. and its allies were part and parcel of those who was oppressing the rest of the world. So it made a real big difference in my own development, in my own internationalism. You know. Does that satisfy you, Matt? I see you leaning forward like you want more.
Well, I have some more questions. Aleda wants to know what your suggestions to the leadership of Black Lives Matter and nonprofits, what your suggestions would be in Oppression Olympics. They haven't been politically educated. But they don't want to listen is the question here.
They haven't been politically educated, but they don't want to listen.
Maybe they have been politically educated, but they don't want to listen.
Well, I think they probably, my advice would be to get politically educated, get an understanding of what's of the struggle that went on before them. Get to know what it was that people of African descent, Black lives did before they came along, and adopt some of those programs. Become more involved in the community, not only when something happened, but on a day-to-day basis. I think that's what's missing with in the Black community today, is people being involved on a day-to-day basis where that other people can relate to them. I mean, if I want to go and talk to someone in Black Lives Matter today, I don't know where to go. I definitely can't go nowhere in my community that I know of. There's no building, no office, they're not in the streets organizing and trying to deal with the day-to-day issues that we're dealing with. I would say organize in the community. That's what I would say.
Thanks.
Or if not Black Lives Matter, it don't have to be Black Lives Matter. I think the Black youth, they need to come together. They don't have to come together under the hashtag, if you will, of Black Lives Matter. Come together and just create programs that will help in their communities, and reach out to others who are struggling in the community already, and help become a part of your community, become a part of the struggle to make things better. Each what's the word I'm looking for? Each
generation.
Thank you, dear. Each generation has the responsibility to do their part, and this generation, I think, needs to do their part in creating programs other than just mobilizing when something happened, which is basically what Black Lives Matter do. If something happened, they'll come together and argue about it and make some noise about what happened, but they don't have no real programs to change what's happening that I know of. And if they do have them, they're not getting those programs out to the people. The people don't really know about these programs if they do have them.
Right.
So I would say that they need to be more involved in the Black community.
Right. And tell the nonprofits to get out the way, right? Because it's the capitalists that create the problems. So you can't put Band-Aids on by going to address some of the symptoms, right? We have structural problems that the people know what's going on in their community and what they need. They don't need the Ford Foundation and all those other corporations to come in there and tell them, because then they control the message. So if you're getting money, if you're a nonprofit and you're getting money from a corporation, you can't talk about the corporations because they're the ones that's paying your salary, right? What the Black Panther Party did was raise money. I mean, people donated, right? But they didn't apply for grants. This was really a people's-led movement. And part of the studying and becoming politically educated means that you already know that you don't know everything and that you must listen. So that says that people are not enough politically educated to know that they still do need to listen and to learn. Because part of why we have this, all of us are living the legacy of Cointelpro. One of the points in the Cointelpro was that to prevent the long-term coalition of militant Black youth. And so how do they do that? Any way they can. And so when people are not able to work together, they have to understand that that didn't just happen. That's a product 50 years in the making. So we have to deconstruct that, and we have to examine that, and we have to study that and say, okay, it's not to say that the Black Panther Party was perfect. There are things that we can look at and learn from. But the minute we start thinking that we know all there is, then we're already doomed. So tell the nonprofits to get out the way and tell people to recognize that they don't know, and that if they need that study, constant, like freedom is a constant struggle, learning is a constant struggle.
You know, the great Pan-Africanist, Black Power, former Black Panther advocate Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael, used to say there were three things you needed to make change. Three things everyone had to do. You had to organize, organize, and organize. And the fact of the matter is, those simple words, just, you know, knocking on the door of a neighbor, or maybe we don't knock on the door, maybe we send a text or a tweet or whatever, but to someone who's not in your circle, someone who's not in your network, but could be, and to say, you know, I think this needs to happen because that's a problem. This may be happening a little more in this last period as everything has become more localized and people are looking out and seeing, all right, if I can't get close to you, I can only get 6 feet away, then let me see who's 6 feet away from me. Maybe that's happening now. But the fact of the matter is, I still feel like we've lost some of the art and some of the practice of organizing and building organization. And, you know, whether it's, you know, we said Jericho, we said Northeast Political Prisoner, we said Spirit of Mandela, it almost doesn't matter which one. But if you stay sort of in a disconnected loop of just, you know, just being online, not being an organization, that's not going to cut it. It's not going to make lasting change. And we have to recognize that momentum and mobilization is not the same thing as movement. And movement building involves long-term campaigns. Movement building almost always involves some reforms. But if we're at a moment when Reverend Jim Lawson can say at Congressman John Lewis's eulogy that we have to get rid of plantation capitalism, it's clear that reform is not the only thing on the agenda. And it's clear that some of the revolutionary aspirations of the Panthers, of Minister Malcolm, of this era, of this moment, have to be understood in organizational terms, in strategic terms, in campaign building terms, towards something more than mere reform. And yeah, obviously the nonprofits are not going to do it for us. They're only going to get in the way. Obviously, there's a lot of momentum going on, but momentum is not the same thing as organization and movement, so we've got to build it now.
Thank you. We have an anonymous question, which is, how do we protect young organizers from modern surveillance and the possibility of being incarcerated for political activity?
Well, I'll start.
You're on mute.
Yeah, I took it off.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I don't think we can stop them. I think we can help them know some of the ways that they are being surveilled, and but we're living in a police state. Everything is geared to surveil us. Our telephones, our television, our the street lights, the signal lights, everything is sending back messages of who we are and what we're doing and where we're going. So I don't think we can come up with a way to prevent them from being surveilled. We can, I mean, there are things that they can do to lessen the surveillance, like leaving their telephone out of the room when they're talking about something that they don't want to tell everybody about, that they don't want people to hear. not sitting in rooms with those smart televisions in them rooms. Leave out of the room. Talk in parks. And talk among yourselves. Don't put everything on social media. Everything that they do, the young folks do, they feel they have to tell somebody on Facebook or tell somebody on Instagram. That's part of the problem. So we are surveilled because we allow ourselves to be surveilled even more than we have to. We carry these telephones. We forget our phone. We run back home to get it. We want to make sure they know who we are, where we are, what we're doing. So if they don't want to be surveilled, they got to start trying to get away from this here technology so much. Get out in the open and talk face to face to people instead of sending everything over the telephone, over the Instagram, over the Facebook.
Right.
That's what I would tell them.
Right. And then I would add to that, be careful of who you're with. If you are organizing with people and they trying to like destroy stuff and say, let's do this or bomb this, whatever, if it sounds outrageous to you, then pay attention to that person. Build relationships with people so that you see them and spend time with them beyond a meeting. Because if I just come to a meeting, you don't know where I'm going home to or who I'm going home to. Right? So build relationships with people where you're watching how they live, not just how they work when they come to a meeting, and pay attention to what people are saying, because this government is good at setting people up. I mean, there are so many Muslims and young Arab people in prison because they were set up by someone. So you have to be really careful. As Matt said, Cointelpro lives and they do set people up. So you just have to be vigilant about who you're around, who you listen to, and who just watch people.
And a lot of what Sekou and déqui are saying really boils down to common sense. No, I'm sorry, I hate to blow this. There are some levels of encryption and some levels of programming that are better than others, but it's not that Zoom is all bad, but WhatsApp is all good, or whatever. I'm just throwing names at it. It's like, you're not going to find that perfect app that's going to give you security. That's false. If you're putting it in an email, if you're sending it out online, likely they can get it. So the things that are going to be online, like this, which happens to be, for most of us, the majority of our activities are going to be public. So live your life publicly. No, that action you're planning a week from Thursday isn't a secret action. You don't care if everyone knows about it. You want people to know about it. You want people to come to that action. That webinar, it's not a secret webinar. And yes, when there are things that they keep quiet about, put the phones away, put the TVs away, put the emails away. Oh yeah, even the emails. And have some face-to-face conversations and planning. It's fairly common sense, and yet, in the drive to be militant and exciting, we see Facebook pictures of people who are showing their guns, literally. Oh, look how militant we are. Look at our arms. Here they are. And if that's not an invitation or a setup, I don't know what is.
Thank you.
Ariel? Okay.
Yeah, we've got a few more questions. So I'm gonna mush some of them together because there are a bunch of them. There are some questions about coalition building within the past of the Black Panther Party and its time in New York City, if there were other cultural or political organizations that the Black Panther Party collaborated with. And then sort of forward-looking, what kind of collaborations do you see as being sort of most generative for the future?
Well, one of our main coalitions was with the Young Lords here in New York, Puerto Rican group. We had very close and good relationships with them. We worked with them We supported their programs. They supported our programs. They adopted a number of our programs, like Breakfast for Children. And I think it's very important that especially people of color to relate to each other, to build coalitions, to build relationships with each other, and to support each other's work. When we look back in the past during the party time, we always had coalitions. We made coalitions with a number of people, the Native Americans, the Chicanos in California. Like I said, the Puerto Ricans here, the Puerto Ricans in Chicago. With Fred Hampton started what is known today as the
Rainbow Coalition.
Rainbow Coalition. Thank you, baby. I don't know what I'd do without you. Yeah, the Rainbow Coalition was started by Fred Hampton, one of the leaders of the Black Panther Party in Chicago, who was assassinated by the FBI and local police there in Chicago because of his organizing and his struggles against the oppression of the people there in Chicago. So, and he brought together not just Blacks and Puerto Rican, he brought together Blacks, Puerto Ricans, Native Americans, poor whites, and anybody else that wanted to struggle against the injustices that they saw. So the Rainbow Coalition was a good example of coalition building, and I think today that can work also. I know there are people talking about the talking about organizing a united front against fascism. I've been talking with some folks myself who are trying to organize a united front across this country against fascism, the rise in fascism that we see coming about today in white supremacist America. So I think that's very important, coalition building. Without it, we will never be successful. We can't become free by ourselves. But I think that it's important that we do lead ourselves, organize ourselves, and depend mainly on ourselves. I think that's very important. And I'm talking about people of African descent right now.
So you forgot to mention Students for a Democratic Society, right? Like we do have white anti-imperialist political prisoners. And so in the contemporary times, we've worked with, on the issue of political prisoners, we've worked with student groups, other kinds of organizations, individuals. Like right now, it seems like things are more individual solidarity more than organizational solidarity. And that was a success of the movements of the 1960s and 70s. And that's what the government paid attention to. So we have to pay attention to that, to know that that is possible.
I guess I'll just say, I saw the question was in part motivated by a comrade of ours named Spirit Child, who has also been part of this Maroon movement, and it's both about what it means to be a modern day Maroon, but also solidarity work to free political prisoner Russell Maroon Shoatz. And déqui and I were deeply involved in a campaign to get Maroon out of solitary. He was in solitary for many, many decades. The UN regulations suggest that 14 days, beyond 14 days in solitary confinement is considered torture, and Maroon spent many more than 14 years in Pennsylvania's gulags. But the idea of a Maroon culture, Maroon consciousness, and Brother Spirit also talked about the Zapatistas, are in some ways sterling examples of the kind of solidarity thinking and the kind of resistance thinking that's needed today. What that means in concrete coalition terms is a little more abstract, but you know, both Sekou and déqui have talked about things in concrete terms. I guess concretely, it's also useful to add, I'm involved, people may have seen it when my screen went blank, in something called People's Strike, which is a fairly new coalition that emerged post-COVID. Organized and initiated by some friends of ours from Jackson, Mississippi, Kali Acuna and Corporation Jackson. And that's an attempt at a united front against fascism, a united front for mutual aid and solidarity, and the idea of building towards a mass general strike. It's a Black-led coalition that looks at the question of especially the labor of Black women, Black, Brown, and Indigenous. And it's a coalition that has events at least on the 1st of every month. So People's Strike is another emerging effort. But the point is, in these last months, we've seen many, many initiatives on the local, regional, national, and international level. So, you know, starting where you are locally, and again, if you have trouble finding out what's going on locally, we'll help you find that out. You know, déqui, Sekou, and I, and Ariel, you as well, I'm sure, are pretty well plugged in. And by the way, I have to do one thing when we're mentioning organizations. You mentioned some of our organizations, and the one that you flubbed in my introduction, the War Resistors League.
Sorry.
I think you said residents. And War Resistors League, you know, in addition to saying, because it's good to get the organizational names correctly, War Resistors League is an organization that's almost 100 years old, and for most of those 100 years was based and housed in the village. So I figure of all of the ones we want to get right, we want to get the village organization correct, War Resistors League and War Resistors International. But there are thousands of organizations all across the country in every locale, some of them very new, some of them many, many, many decades old. You know, if the local church group is right for you, cool. If the local community group is right for you, cool. If you need to build your own revolutionary youth group, cool. But building organization on the local level and then coalescing on the regional, national, and international is the way to go. And if you have trouble from there, contact us and we'll help you out.
Thanks for that correction.
Okay. I see that déqui was listing some of the political prisoners as we were speaking, and I think that was good. I think one name I didn't see her mention was Baranza Bowles. That's another one of our.
He's there.
Oh, I didn't see his name. I'm sorry. Okay.
Hopefully somebody will see who I forgot to mention. But again, you could go to the Jericho Movement.com website.
Somebody said Rochelle McGee, which is
see that? Thank you. Yes.
I think Valerie Haynes said that.
Yes.
And Mumia.
See that?
See, it's very good to have chat. This is a new thing. So even without being in the room with us or passing notes, we have younger comrades of us telling us the little errors we're making. So it's excellent. This is historical correction in real time. So we love it. Thank you, Sister Lita. Thank you, Sister Val. We love you.
Anyone say, no one said Kojo. I forget Kojo's last name. Kojo
Bomani. Kojo Bomani.
Yeah, Kojo Bomani. He's another one of our political prisoners that no one mentioned.
So I'm just gonna say, I'm on my phone now, so I'm not even gonna try to type in. Like, I don't have the dexterity to type in, and I can barely read, but I'm just appreciative to all of you that are typing and reading and chatting and.
Yeah, this was wonderful. I mean, we do this work together. It's, you know, I didn't always know that political prisoners existed in this stolen land, right? Because we are taught and we are conditioned and indoctrinated with the belief that this is the land of freedom and democracy. And so we're not responsible for what we did when we didn't know. But these events happen to help to bring other people into the work, to say, wow, I didn't know that, but now that I know how, like it was asked before, what can I do, right? Because none of us just arrived where we are today. Life is a journey, and our political education and the politicization is a journey. So we need things like this to make connections with people, to talk to people, and expose people to the history, right? Yasmin Majid just said Kenny Zulu Whitmore, right? Because the names come as we're saying it and saying it. So, you know, it's like my grandmother, when she would try to call 4 or 5 of her grandchildren, she could never get our names right.
Yeah. Well, there's so many political prisoners in America. A lot of people just don't know how many. I mean, I was in one of the political gulags.
We lost you, babe.
Y'all can't hear me?
Yeah, we hear you now.
I was in one of the political gulags in Florence, Colorado, and there were so many political prisoners that I was shocked to find so many of them. These a lot of them had been arrested in other countries and brought to this country, over in the Mideast, brought here from Afghanistan, brought here from Syria, brought here from Egypt, brought here from Iraq, Libya. I mean, just so many of them there, and a lot of them can't even speak the language. They being really treated terribly because they don't know. They don't have their family or support here. People don't really know. What's the sister's name? Afia, the Muslim sister.
Sadiki.
Afia Sadiki, yeah. She's another political prisoner, and then there's a number of Palestinian political prisoners that haven't been mentioned. There's so many political prisoners in this country that we don't even know about. That none of us know all of them. I don't think. It's something that needs to be investigated and reported upon. You know, some of our left-leaning journalists ought to make that a project, because they can probably get more of that information than most people. If you know how to, you have to know how to get that information, because they don't just publish it. No, there's nowhere where the government writes down, or here's where all political prisoners. This is a list of all political prisoners. Of course, we have to remember that this government still denies that anyone's a political prisoner. If you talk to a representative of this government, they'll tell you that they have no political prisoners in this country. That everyone in this country that's locked up for a criminal, and it just ain't true. It just is not true.
Well, that's why this was so important. And Ariel, we want to thank you, and we want to thank all the people that were here. So you put it in the chat about where people can get this excellent book, right?
Tell us how much they should PayPal you for the book.
$25.
And then we'll sign it and ship it to you, right? And the email is SA.
Oh, I'm sorry. For the signing and shipping, it's $30.
Oh, okay, because you got to ship it, right?
Yeah.
So saodinga@gmail.com, and you can PayPal him at paypal.me/SOdinga, right, babe?
Yes.
And I'm gonna send out a follow-up email tomorrow with the video from this, and I'll include all of that information, as well as links to some of the organizations that you've been mentioning. I've just been jotting them down. So we have many more questions, but in the interest of time, I think this is a good place to end, and I just want to express so much gratitude for all of you and for your work.
Well, thank you. And for people who didn't get to answer their questions, they can, I put my email there. Sekou put his email there, you know, because we know that, you know, people have time and we want to be respectful of people's time. This is a life journey, so it doesn't end because this webinar ends. So we continue to struggle and we continue to work. So send us an email, see how we can build together. And thank you all for being here. We're so gratified and grateful that you bring us into your home to talk about our captured freedom fighters.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you. Rebuild.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Let me just say this. Lynn Stewart, our dear beloved lawyer, people's lawyer, she used to say that this is a beautiful struggle, and it truly is. We love her and we miss her.
Great last words.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Thanks to
Whoever.
everyone that tuned in. Thanks to everyone that's listening. And let's hope that everyone will try to find some political prisoner that they can support. Let's support our political prisoners. We need to.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yasmin Majid just put in good final words as well. Power to the people.
Absolutely.
Power to the people.
Thank you. Free the land. Have a great night. Peace.
Free them all. Free them all.
Free them all. Free them all.